Wilson Miles, Black Film and TV. Can you explain what the governor at large means? What is the role? What is it exactly does it do?
Yes, absolutely. It's an honor to be able to serve. I mean, ultimately, the Board of Governors, it's a service organization. We oversee the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences. And for me as a governor at large, it means I was appointed as governor and I serve through the executive branch. So there are 17 branches?
17 branches in 2 categories.
And every branch votes for 3 governors. Well, myself and 2 other governors were appointed by the board to serve as governors at large, and this idea of a governor at large came out of our A2020 initiative, where there was a desire to bring more representation and inclusivity to the board. And as a result, the governors at large are, 1, qualified within their branch, but 2, there's always an eye towards representation and inclusion. And so my job as a governor is to, help govern, to weigh in on important issues that the Academy is facing, dealing with anything that may come our way, which there are a lot of things. I just was on the search committee for the new CEO. His name is Bill Kramer, and he'll start at the end of July. So there's so many duties, but fundamentally, the Academy exists to further the arts and sciences of film, to further the excellence of motion pictures, and the Board of Governors is the body that helps oversee and on some level run that side of things.
If I may, we're seeing a lot of great influence, I think, when African creators, if you will, and getting those films highlighted. Do you see a shift maybe even to the next genre or region in terms of the Caribbean and seeing some of those filmmakers highlighted?
Yeah, we're already working. First of all, thank you all for being here. And thank you, ABFF, for allowing us to come here. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. First of all, we've been seeing it, right? We've been seeing it in Bali. We've been seeing it outside of the U.S. for a long time. So when you think about the global membership, you think about 10,000 plus in 70-something countries in about 6 continents. And 22% live outside of the U.S. So we're always having an eye towards what that looks like and how that's going to work. But us participating in festivals, internationally and domestic, is another way of how we are showing up and being present with the filmmakers and figuring out how we can add specific value to the festival and how we can just be better partners and educate, share, show, and show up in how we can be better partners and what we can all share in this space of the art of filmmaking, but most importantly, what we do all year round, how you can participate, how you can start to be a part of the Academy, and most importantly, why.
So I'm Jackie Clark with Rolling Out. Pleasure to meet you guys. Thank you for being here. My question for you guys are, what are your personal goals through your roles to impact change at the Academy?
I've been at the Academy for about 8 years, so I've had about 4 or 5 different positions since I've been there, so I've seen it well before Oscars So White and now into our Aperture 2025. My goal when I got into this position to be Executive Vice President of Membership and Awards is basically to create space, right? I'm about 3 things, a lot of things, but 3 things: community, culture, connectivity. So what kind of space are we creating now that we've brought our members into the Academy since 2020? What is this space? How does it feel like home? How are we affecting the process? And when you think about the Oscars, you think about the symbol, the Oscars. I'm obsessed with the system to the symbol and how to make that system more fair and equitable across the board while building out the industry relations and what the Academy is doing all year round with our partners at ABFF this year to be better partners throughout the year.
For me, one of the initiatives that I've always been passionate about, obviously representation and inclusion, but one of the initiatives that I really worked on, which we were able to pass 2 years ago, were the new representation and inclusion standards. And those standards take effect, not this coming Oscars, but the following one. And basically that means there are 4 different standards, 2 of which anyone applying for Best Picture will have to qualify for 2 of the 4 representation and inclusion standards in order to get consideration for Best Picture. Because for me, I've been in Hollywood since I was 18 years old. I've seen it as Sean, from the ground up, from an intern all the way to being an executive at Sony Pictures and now running my own company. So I can speak directly to how much our industry needs more representation and inclusion. And sometimes that's not always done out of the goodness of people's hearts. Sometimes there are certain change that has to be legislated and become the letter of the law in order for the law to then align with the intent. So my hope and my prayer is to continue that work so that the Academy can really be the lighthouse for where we are trying to go and need to go as a culture. And as an industry, you know, this industry would collapse if diverse people stop supporting the content, right? So the idea that that's a fact, yet when you look at, you know, how many people are employed in the industry, and you look at those that run the industry, and it's still not yet representative. So my personal goal through serving as governor is to do everything I can to further representation.
Hi, I'm Selena Hill from Black Enterprise. Can you just talk to how you measure that progress and that change, and is it moving at a cadence that you think is acceptable?
Well, on some level, you can measure the progress and change through numbers. And, you know, like specifically, like, okay, what is the demographics of our membership? What does it look like when, you know, in terms of people getting jobs, and, you know, how there's a lot of different entities that publish a lot of reports about the numbers. Some of it is anecdotal, you know, just looking around. You know, when I first started as a governor, and, you know, we would be in a room, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And now, you know, years later, there are more, you know, so you start to, it's a little anecdotal. But then also, a lot of it has to do with the conversations that are being had. One of the reasons why we were so passionate about these representation and inclusion standards, so that every studio has to think about, how are we diversifying our ranks? So, is it happening fast enough? Absolutely not. It is a slow process. Again, I've been in the entertainment business since I was 18 years old. 44 now, that's 26 years. And I can tell you that it's slightly more diverse, but we still have a long way to go. And for us, you know, what we do, you know, me as a governor and Shawn as EVP, you know, our commitment is to working from the inside out, the outside in, to try and allow the academy to make good on what it says it represents. Right. And for the industry to say, well, we are all about furthering excellence in film. Well, then how can it be excellent if it's not excellent for everyone? If everyone's not included in the definition of excellence, how can it be excellent? So it's not been happening fast enough. I do think it's better than what it was when I first started, yet I can acknowledge there's a long way to go.
What was your name again?
Selena.
Selena, it was an amazing question. I think that, do you know anything 94 years old that moves fast?
No.
Exactly. So with that being said, I mean, echoing what DeVon said, I mean, you know, I think it's measuring change sometimes is just figuring out if it's changing, period. Right, and so when you're looking at what happened in Oscars So White from 2016, we made the commitment to 2020 to double the number of women and people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. We did that, surpassed that, now we're continuing that evolution on to the Oscars Aperture 2025, which is now that system that I spoke about being affected by the inclusion standards he's talking about. Now also creating 7 different affinity groups within the Academy for the members who represent those from Black to Middle Eastern, North African, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, LGBTQIA, so all accessibility. So to create that space within, so it's a multi-layered approach, and it's an approach that I think over time it creates the system needed to sustain. We don't want to make a quick change that can't sustain. Right. We want to make a change that can sustain over time. And he mentioned about legislation, and you know, when you're creating something, the Academy is the industry. It's 17 different branches. So you have everything from anything it takes to make a film, acting, producing, writing, visual effects, production design, makeup and hair. And so we're working really closely with all of those individuals as well with the industry to put this system into place so that it can sustain, but that takes time. And I think that we're in this generation now where everything is so quick and so fast. But I do think that when you're looking at nominations, though we can't control what that is, right? When you're looking at Parasite winning, had never happened before. When you're looking at films that were typically in the international feature category, now no longer in one specific sector, but winning Best Picture. You know, and when you're looking at different, so you have to look at it from a multi-layered approach. The membership approach, the outreach and engagement, what we're doing all year round, the money that we're putting towards specific investments and towards specific industries and communities, as well as how that's playing out in the media. The average person only knows the Academy one night a year, right. Tune in for the Oscars on Sunday at ABC. Well, my goal, along with DeVon's support and all things that he's doing with the Inclusion Committee, is to further that 364 days out of the year. Before I got here, I was in New York with Yvette Rodriguez and Rosie Perez, who lead our Latin affinity group called La Agenda. We had a dinner with all the Latino filmmakers in New York, in Brooklyn, before we came here to kind of figure out what is the problem? What is the issue and the barrier? So it's not only Black voices. Black voices are extremely important, right? But how are we using our voice to also further the narrative for all the other communities and creating space, because our members are our ambassadors, because our members are the industry.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen with Nocturnal, and I wanted to know, how do you join the Inclusion Committee?
So the specific inclusion committee, okay, there's 54 board of governors, and then there's 9 board committees. So DeVon oversees the board, the inclusion advisory committee. So when you're a member, you're able to then opt in to be on those as a governor. So the 54 governors are spread about, and then they go to 9 different committees. There's the membership committee, there's the education and outreach committee, there's the museum committee. And so then they choose a chair. So the president chooses a chair, DeVon Franklin, he's chairing that committee. They then select who is on that committee based on the governors that are there. So the decisions that are being made from that committee are at the highest level with the full understanding and support of the Board of Governors to further whatever discussions or missions that are there. And then as staff, we work very closely to support and to kind of create with them and in partnership all of these different initiatives. So when you're talking about the inclusion standards, and so they're looking at it at various different levels, and then as staff, we're looking at its various different levels and working with the industry to make sure the industry understands. For example, last summer, we connected with all the studios to personally walk them through. When's the last time y'all just like listened to a press release or watched it and was like, oh, I got all the information. I gather information by this. So we sat down with every distributor, every studio to walk them through what this actually means, because we don't want anyone to not qualify for Best Picture. But we do want you to think about it, as DeVon said, when you are making your films, and think about it when you are putting your people not only in front of the camera. Those inclusion standards are not just for what we see on the camera, it's what we see behind the scenes. It's the creative execs. It's the people who are making the decisions about the funding and the money behind the film.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Okay, sorry.
I have one. I'm Tiffany with the Spot Real Talk, and I want to know, are there term limits for the inclusion committee for the members?
So there are term limits for the governors. It really started to happen, I want to say about 2 years ago. Yes, and so a maximum of 12 years. So before, you could have been on the board for a long time. So now we've instilled those term limits now for a maximum of 12 years. So for example, we had a record number of governors' seats based on the term limits go up last year, and I want to say it was about 13 different new voices that added to the room. It's the most representative board that it's ever been, more women than it's ever been in the last 94, 95 years. So those term limits, again, when you talk about the system, really are starting to create the space for new voices. And so the term limits don't just stop at the board level. They're on the international feature category. They're on every committee that is representative within the body of the organization at the Academy of Motion Pictures.
Sorry, Warren Shaw, 19 Media Group. If you could explain again a little bit more about, you said those standards, how did they change, and kind of like what are the actual standards now for the inclusion?
Yeah, the standards are actually on the Academy website, so if you go to oscars.org, it kind of walks you through everything. But there's 4 different standards. There's Standard A, which is for on-screen representation. Standard B is for behind the camera, what the representation looks like for the crews. Standard C is about, like the internships and apprenticeship programs at studios or distributors that are distributing the films. And then Standard D is basically like in the marketing departments, are there executives that are in the marketing and distribution departments that are representative and inclusive? So those are 4 standards, and there are sub-standards to each standard. And for a film to qualify, they only have to meet 2 of the 4. So it's not punitive in any regard. If anything, there are so many different ways that any one film or any one company could ultimately qualify for the standards. And the standards, the framework of these standards were created based upon BAFTA. BAFTA has been working on, representation and inclusion for years. They created standards that they use as it relates to the British film industry and their awards. And so we use that as almost a template for creating our standards. And we really did a lot of work within the industry prior to voting on the standards and making the standards official, to really just workshop and make sure that all of our stakeholders, all of our studio partners from the major and many major studios had some say in the process. And so the standards that we ultimately were able to pass represent that feedback.
And to just double down on what he said, all of that, yes. And what we did was this past summer, we're talking to a lot of the studios, we got to hear a little bit more of like where they are and where they're not in terms of like their own departments and what they have in for the infrastructure. So the standards are what they are at the moment, but there's always conversations about how can we continue to refine those standards and make them kind of for the long, again, sustaining, to make it for the long-standing time effective. Because again, sometimes, and DeVon said it, at the kindness of people's hearts. It's not about changing people's hearts and minds no more. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's hearts and minds are in a different place. And so then let's change your bottom line, right? So we know what your bottom line is, that you want to qualify for a Best Picture and or you want it to make money. So then how are we kind of coming together in partnership with the industry and the governors and with their leadership in regards to making sure that it is important to you and imperative for you to make sure that you're being inclusive of this. So with that data that we collected, we are working to understand kind of where are their potential holes and where are their potential opportunities, most importantly, to continue to refine over time. Elena?
Yes. Can you speak to the vibe at this year's ABFF and why it was important for you both to be here?
Oh yeah. So as I oversee the membership and awards, I also oversee all of the festivals. So somebody once told me, show me your budget and I'll show you what you care about, right? And so if we're gonna show up at festivals, Sundance is so important. Telluride is so important. TIFF is so important. So is Martha's Vineyard, so is ABFF, so is Shanghai, so is all of the other international film festivals as well. So for me, it was extremely important for us to show up and show in solidarity where we are really coming from a community standpoint, because we benefit, the Academy benefits being here. It's not for ABFF to benefit, we benefit from being here. We're better because of it. And I wanna say that I think that it's time as an Academy of Credit Festival, over 20 years, for us to be here in a way that is solidifying that we understand, we hear this community, and this community is not just the Black community, it's the film community. And I think the more that we can rope in and take out, oh, Black community, this community, we're all part of the film community. And DeVon mentioned it earlier when we talked about excellence. You know, excellence to me might mean something totally different to somebody else. Boys in the Hood might be excellent to me, you know, and Titanic might be excellent to somebody else. So just continuing to refine and explore and unpack what excellence means. And excellence to me is this festival, always has been this festival, with the Academy's fingerprint on it or not. But I think that being in this position now, I'm in a position to be able to say, I think we should spend our money here, and these are the many reasons why.
And for me, you know, I started with ABFF. I was here when none of y'all were here. So back in like 2003, 2000, okay, you were, okay. 2003, 2004, originally I actually brought a film to the HBO Short Film Festival that won that year. So ABFF, I used to sit on the board of ABFF, and known Jeff Friday for 20 years, and Melanie Cherie forever. So it was, you know, when Shawn reached out and said, hey, would you like to come and talk about the Academy?
I said, I need you to come.
I said, all right, man, hey, if you need me, I'll be there. But it was also, you know, ABFF is like home. So coming back in this capacity was something I was excited to do.